What is up, Marvel Spider-Man Maximum Venom fans? It feels like it has been so long because, of course, we had a month break, and it has been only really 2 months since we had our last episode of Marvel Spider-Man Maximum Venom, but it just feels like it's been years ago since we got that episode with Moon Knight and the Avengers and the symbiotes and everything. So it just feels like it was such a long time ago, but it really was only 2 months ago. But now we finally have a brand new episode of Marvel Spider-Man Maximum Venom. Even though this episode had literally nothing to do with Venom or the symbiotes at all, there weren't even any teases or anything. Like, sure, the whole trial with Max was about him using the V252 and everything, but there wasn't really anything going on with the symbiotes. But it was still a great episode, even though it didn't really have anything to do with the main plot. So anyway, let's go ahead and break down this episode and break down everything that went on the episode and what we can expect from the next episode of Marvel Spider-Man Maximum Venom. Because we start this episode off with Spider-Man, he's swinging through town, and he is bringing this drive to Miles, who is currently at Horizon High. And this drive, as we find out later, is actually going to be very important to Max's trial. But on his way there, Spider-Man actually gets attacked by the Tinkerer, so he has to battle him. But of course, the Tinkerer is very easily defeated because he's like a C-list villain, and literally he just uses tech to fight Spider-Man and stuff, so he was easily defeated. So then Peter completely interrupts the trial of Max, and he has this drive, and this drive has a video on it, which actually shows us a video of Otto Octavius, who, of course, we know completely hated Max Modell, but in this video, he was basically confessing that he realized that Max really isn't that bad, and he's actually a good guy, and he's a genius, and he's a great scientist and everything. So that's great. I mean, that's definitely enough evidence to prove that Max should continue to work there. But then Curt Connors just butts in, and he's still trying to prove that Max puts his students in danger and stuff like that. So things aren't really looking that good at this point. So Peter goes and has a talk with the head administrator, which is like the leader of this trial, who is basically going to decide whether or not Max is fired. And she's kind of like the judge and everything, except she's not actually a judge, as Peter mistakes her for in this episode. But she says that Otto, when he was talking about how Max is such a good guy, Otto was talking about how if he hadn't had Max's help and Max's research, then he wouldn't have been able to save Alexei and turn him back into human from when he turned into the Rhino for the first time. So the head administrator said that she really thought that was a good story, and maybe if they could get Alexei to actually testify, then they'd actually let Max keep his job. But Alexei has apparently been sick the past few days, or is he? Because he's actually not. He's actually just been missing. So Peter actually goes to investigate. He goes to his apartment, and he is able to track down his phone to an abandoned warehouse. And it turns out the Rhino is back, and this is basically a battle between Rhino and Spider-Man, so that was really cool. But Rhino actually ends up defeating Spider-Man, kinda, and he actually uses this trap door to go down into the sewers and in the tunnels down there. But of course, Spider-Man does follow him. But meanwhile, we do have Dr. Connors. He's getting pretty shady. But actually, I'm gonna save that for the ending, because usually I just go in order of everything that happened in the episode, but I'm going to split it up today. So I'm going to talk about everything that went on in the episode, and then we'll save the Connor stuff for the end, because I really want to go in depth with that, because there's some crazy predictions and theories going on with that storyline there. But anyway, Spider-Man, he finds Rhino, and Rhino is actually trapped in this cage. So then he keeps exploring these tunnels, and he finds out that it's like basically a giant like beehive. And he also discovers that the Jackal's serums that originally created the Rhino are there being used to mutate these animals. So that's definitely not good. But then we find out that Swarm is actually behind it all, and he is running this underground Monster League battle, gladiator type battle here. So that's really cool. And Rhino actually ends up putting Spider-Man in a cell, but then he tricks him and escapes, and then Swarm gets trapped in the cell. You think, the day is saved, and Swarm is trapped, he's defeated and everything. So Spider-Man is able to get the unconscious Rhino back to Horizon High, where they are able to, cure him. And when they do cure him, this is when things get confusing, because it turns out it's not Alexi. It's just some other random dude that was turned into a Rhino. So where is Alexi then? So this just complicates things even more, because, Max is still in trouble there, and they're about to give their verdict. So Spider-Man comes in and decides to testify to try and save Max, until Dr. Connors reveals that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and he's been an accomplice to all of Max's crimes and all this stuff. So he's just making this not look too good for either Spider-Man or Peter Parker. So Peter has to make a choice. He can either let Max get fired, or he can reveal his identity and possibly, save the day and help Max keep his job. So he decides he has to reveal the truth, and he takes off his mask, and he thinks he's protecting Max, but it doesn't really work out that well, because basically now everything that Spider-Man said is useless, because, he's an accomplice and he was working with Max the whole time. So the head administrator eventually has to actually fire Max, and actually makes Kurt Connors the principal. So that's definitely not good. But finally, Gwen and Anya know the truth here. I'm glad that they finally know Peter is Spider-Man. It's about time now. Honestly, I don't get why he didn't tell them when they first became superheroes, because if they're both superheroes, why shouldn't they know? Because the whole reason of not telling someone your secret identity is because you want to protect them. But if they're superheroes too, they can protect themselves. So you'd think he'd just tell him. We saw Peter Parker in Avengers Infinity War. When he first met Doctor Strange, he hadn't even talked to him before or really met him before. He was like, oh, hey, I'm Peter Parker, by the way. He didn't care there, because Doctor Strange is a superhero, so they cool with each other. So, I don't get why it took them this long to reveal his identity to them, but I'm just glad it's finally over and they finally know the truth. But then things get even worse when the new Rhino actually breaks loose, and Rhino's out, I guess, and he escapes. So that's definitely not good. So the Spider team, they all suit up and head back to the warehouse, but everything is gone except they do find one of Swarm's kind of bee parts. So Peter walks home to examine this bee, and he actually runs into MJ on his way home, and he stops and talks to her for a little bit, and she's playing basketball, even though he calls it sports ball or something like that. No, he needs to start studying what sports are actually called. I get he's supposed to be a scientist and stuff, but you should know what basketball is. But anyway, she actually gives him some advice. He should just talk to Anya and Gwen. Yeah, they're mad at him for keeping this secret the whole time, and it's understandable because he should have told them, but he really just needs to talk to them and, see where their head is at, because obviously they're mad, but they need to mend this friendship here so they can kind of get back to normal and focus on the main goal of the day. But, that is when Peter actually goes to visit Max, because he wasn't able to figure out the bee on his own. So he goes to Max for help, but Max actually completely rejects him, because he's like, anytime I think I'm helping, I'm just hurting people. So then that forces Peter to go back to Horizon High, and that is where he meets up with Grady Scraps, and they do end up coming up with a solution that actually leads Peter back to the warehouse, and that is where he unfortunately gets trapped once again, and now he is trapped in there with the other spiders, Miles, Gwen, Anya, and now they are a part of the Underground Monster League, where they basically have to fight these mutant rhinos and mutant spiders, while villains like Hammerhead and Silvermane are also betting on it, and they paid a whole bunch of money to just watch Spider-Man die and stuff. So that's definitely not good. But then this is where team of spiders during this battle actually find out that the rhinos are being controlled by swarms bees and that they're like stuck into their backs and stuff. So if they just remove those or like send out a sonic transmitter or sonic wave of energy and stuff, then that can shut them off basically. But once they figure that out, Swarm is like, oh no, I gotta do something to fix this. So he actually ends up controlling Gwen, Miles, and Anya. So now it's like the whole Spider team versus Spider-Man. But luckily, Anya, before she got mind controlled by Swarm, was able to finish building her sonic transmitter. So Spider-Man uses that and ends up defeating Swarm. And now the Spider team is basically back to normal, and the day is saved, fortunately. And this is where things get crazy, because when they get back, they think that they're all good, but they're like, well, if Swarm was using the Jackal's serums out there, then maybe the Jackal is behind this. And I'm kind of thinking that maybe he could, because this coincides with Kurt Connors, who I'll talk about in a little bit here, because we know that he's working for someone, and basically the big theory right now is that it's Norman Osborn, but it could also possibly be the Jackal, aka Miles Warren, because I think he's supposedly dead right now. I don't really remember for sure, but just like Norman Osborn, he could have survived and everything, and he could be looking for revenge, and he probably has this big, huge plan. So this could be the Jackal. I say it's between the Jackal and Norman Osborn. But I'll get into that more. But before I do that, let's talk about all that Kurt Connors stuff, because he is pretty shady in here. And honestly, I don't really like this version of Kurt Connors, because my favorite Spider-Man animated series is Spectacular Spider-Man. And in that series, and honestly any other version of Spider-Man that you see Kurt Connors in, he's like a good guy. He's a scientist. He's a friend of Peter Parker and everything. But in this one, he's just straight up evil. So I kind of don't like that. But he's a great character though. He's good at being evil here. And in about the middle of the episode, he calls his boss and says like everything is going to plan and Modell will be out and everything. But then later on in the episode, while the spiders are fighting in the Underground Monster League, he calls his boss and says, tune into the Underground Monster League station. So then he does, and this is where the boss gets all angry because things aren't going as to plan, and we see kind of our first look at him, and I wasn't completely sure if we saw either, was it just the back of his chair, or is he in some kind of pod there? So I'm not completely sure there, so let me know down in the comments below, like, was that just the back of his chair, or was he in some kind of pod? Because if he is in some kind of pod, then that would make sense if it's one of those dead characters that is supposedly dead but not really, like if it's Norman Osborn, if it's the Jackal, like if they were dead, or maybe they were just like brutally injured and now they have to stay in that pod to stay alive or something. So I'm not completely sure on that. But then let's talk about the ending scene, because we did get a nice little ending scene there with Peter and MJ, and he actually remembered, shoot hoops, so he finally kind of learned a term there when it comes to basketball. And I love how when he's getting his form ready to shoot the basketball into the hoop, he misses on purpose, and like that's a classic Spider-Man thing, because like he could join the football team if he wanted to, and he'd be great at football. He would dominate the field, and he could do the same thing with basketball or baseball or basically any sport or whatever, but he has to keep up the idea that he is just a nerd and he's weak and stuff. So because if he starts doing that, then people are going to get suspicious, like, wait, is he Spider-Man? So he can't really do that, and that's why he misses on purpose, and I really love that moment. And this also gets me curious, like, are we actually going to see a romance between MJ and Peter? Because obviously that's the thing from the comics, and MJ and Peter are, if I'm being honest, I think MJ is probably my favorite romantic relationship and girlfriend for Peter compared to like Gwen or Liz Allen and stuff like that. So I hope they do get together, but we only have 2 episodes here, and in animated shows like this that are meant more for kids, we usually don't get romances like that, so I doubt we'll actually get anything of an actual boyfriend-girlfriend relationship here, but I feel like we may get at least some teases of that, and we could kind of see here that they are kind of flirting a bit, So they do definitely like each other. So that is great. But that is where the episode ends. That is pretty much everything that happened in episode 4, titled Spider-Man Unmasked of Marvel Spider-Man Maximum Venom. It was a great episode. Didn't really set up anything for the actual Maximum Venom part of it and the symbiotes and everything. But this is actually starting to get me thinking that maybe this is the end of Venom and the symbiotes, because this was one of the more confusing parts of the last episode. Like, all the symbiotes were defeated and everything. And now really the only setup we have for the new episodes is Curt Connors and his boss and everything. So what if we don't actually have the symbiotes and Venom for the next couple episodes? Because there is only 2 episodes left. So I don't know if there's really that much you can do with it, especially if they're supposedly defeated right now. So maybe the final 2 episodes will just be all about Curt Connors and his boss, whether it's Norman Osborn or the Jackal or someone else, because I feel like they pretty much did everything that they could do with the symbiotes and Venom and stuff. Like, Venom died in the first episode, and yeah, so I'm not completely sure if we're actually going to see more of them. Like, all the characters that we saw in promo art and stuff that we knew were going to turn into symbiotes, we saw all of that. So pretty much everything that we were supposed to get from Maximum Venom, we've gotten. So now, starting with this episode, it's kind of just something completely different, and it's really just like the second half of the season is really just a regular Marvel Spider-Man season. So I kind of like that, because even though we did only have like 3 episodes all about the symbiotes and Venom, it does get a little tiring after a while. Like, it's just Venom and symbiotes every episode. So I do like getting some variety in here, like with the Rhinos and Swarm and everything. So I'm not necessarily saying I'm hoping that we're done with the symbiotes, but if we are, I'm alright with that. I'm alright if they move on from that, because I'm pretty sure it has been confirmed that this is the final season of the show. So I say just, spend these last couple episodes really bringing it and ending off this Spider-Man show well with a great villain like possibly Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin, or maybe even Miles Warren, the Jackal. So yeah, I'm not completely against the symbiotes returning, but like I said, we don't really need them to. But anyways, guys, let me know down in the comments below, who do you think the Dr. Curt Connors' boss is? Do you think it's Norman Osborn? Do you think it's the Jackal? Do you think it's someone else? And what do you think will be happening in the next few episodes? Do you think the symbiotes are returning? Do you think it's just going to be about Curt Connors and his boss? So let me know. I'd really love to see what you guys think. I respond to pretty much every comment, so go ahead and continue the discussion down below. But before I finish off this video, I would like to mention another video that I'm posting later, because if you like the Fantastic Four, and if you would love to see a Fantastic Four animated series similar to Spider-Man Maximum Venom, then you should definitely hit that subscribe button and notification bell, because I am posting a video later today, probably a couple hours from now, it depends, about how we may possibly be getting a Fantastic Four animated series. So I'm super excited for that, so really stay tuned for that. It's going to be great. So please check that out when it releases. But other than that, a great episode of Maximum Venom. I'm definitely looking forward to the next one. As far as I'm aware, it will release next month in September, so I'm excited for that, and I'll also keep you up to date with any news and stuff like that. I'll make more videos and updates, so that's great. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and hit that subscribe button so I can keep you up to date on everything that goes on in the Marvel life.